What's going on, everybody? Today I wanted to make a video on how to tune pro drift cars in Assetto Corsa. There seems to be a lot of questions around this discussion, and we're going to go over the basics on how to tune a pro drift car today. I'm going to be completely honest. There is no secret to tuning that I have. Frankly, in a pro car or a high horsepower drift car, for me at least, in Assetto Corsa, you can do some basic tuning adjustments and you could be 80 to 85% of the way to having a super dialed in car. Now, the nuance of getting to a super dialed in car is to the driver directly. It may be a different dampening setup. It may be a different suspension setup, depending on your driving style, how you drive, etc., etc. A lot of it goes off of feeling, but there is that 80 to 85% that is general consensus that will make your car feel better. So that's what we are doing today. And in this video, we're also going to have a wheel cam, as you can see by the wheel cam camera. Hello. The wheel we're going to be using is a SimMagic Alpha U alongside a SimMagic GTS wheel. And with that, let's get into the video. So we're going to hop into the VDC 4.0 E92 as our test car today. And the track we're going to be at is VDC Stirrup Layout B. So first things first, let's hop into the car and let's just lay down a run with the stock tune and see how it feels. With any car that I drive, I always try to make sure the force feedback for the wheel is good at first. So prior to this, I've driven this car before, obviously, and I turned down the in-game force feedback. And you could do that by hopping into Assetto Corsa apps, which is on the right sidebar menu, and going to controller tweaks. And here you can see I have a multitude of different things that I could do. You don't want to mess with anything down here, just the car force feedback gain. Right now, I have it at 50%. If your car's force feedback isn't dialed in, then how can you put a tune on the car without having proper force feedback? So let's give it a rip right now, see how it goes. Probably shift up to fourth. We initiate. So off the rip, I can see I don't have a ton of forward bite, which on this track, you know, that's okay. You really don't need it. As you can see, it's just kind of sitting throughout the corner. But the gearing feels actually pretty good. So honestly, not a terrible baseline tune to go off of at first. So the next thing I always like to do, especially in VDC 4.0 cars, is utilize the in-game Assetto Corsa tire pop-up. And it tells you your pressures in your tires. Now, there is an optimal temperature for VDC tires, and that being when the PSI is marked green. So in this case, the front tires are a little bit cold. Now, when it comes to the pressures of your front tires, having too high or too grippy of a front tire will make your car understeer. So personally, for my preference, I don't like a ton of front tire bite, if that makes sense. So usually I'll take my tires and I'll bump them up to 29. This is a good balance of having a little more pressure to get that optimal grip out of the car. And then the rear, I like to bump it down to 21 just because the tires do heat up. And when they heat up, the pressure goes up, and you don't want the pressure to be too high because they may balloon. So as you can see here, the fronts are less blue, but still allows you to get that grip. And the rear is a little less green, right? So as the run goes on, you'll start to get more grip, and it'll be a lot smoother of an arc of grip, if that makes sense, out of the tire. So the next thing we want to look at is our gearing. So for this track, I do like about a 130 mile per hour driving gear, which conveniently enough, we already have that. So 133 miles an hour. I'm not going to touch the gearing right now. So with those two very small changes, let's do another run. Come through the cones, pump it up to fourth, flick it right in. Yeah, I'm using a little bit of left foot brake to stable out the car. I'd like to not use that, right? Yeah, ooh. Little deep there. We could see my gearing, right? A big thing with people and gearing in their car is they either have too much wheel speed or not enough. So as you can see, I'm not hitting red line, right? This is the sound of red line. I'm not hitting it all the time. It's just below red line, and that ensures that I'm maximizing my power curve and my wheel speed, so I could still have that forward momentum out of the car, and it doesn't feel like it wants to grip up because it doesn't have enough wheel speed. It doesn't have too much wheel speed where, you know, it's just not able to spin the tires. So after I get my gearing and my tires sorted, and usually it takes a little longer than that, right? I like to go to my drivetrain and my generic area. When I was hitting the brakes there, it felt like the car was scooting back a bit, right? It wasn't my ideal braking bias or pressure. And again, this is all preference. For my brake bias on pretty much every single pro car I run, I like a 69% brake bias. This way, it's still a decent balance between the front and the rear, but less so the rear because the car will, you know, pivot around, and more so in the front. And then my braking power, I like to put it at about 88%. When I hit the left foot brake, I'm not slowing down the car, but more so stabling out the car through the corner. And then when it comes to drivetrain, you want to make sure your diff power is at 100% and your diff coast is also at 100% and your diff preload is at 0 Newton meters. This way, your diff is locked, absolutely locked. That is what it is in the VDC 4.0 cars. This setup means your diff is locked. I just like to do that. I don't really like to tune my cars based off the diff. It's just another variable that's thrown in. So get rid of a variable, lock your diff. That's just my thought and my philosophy. The next thing I like to do is go to a flat part of the track. So this is a relatively flat part of stirrup, and I like to pull up the suspensions app icon. This shows you a lot of different things. It shows what your caster is, and also shows your camber and your toe, which is what we want to look at. So first things first, we want to look at our front camber. When we turn the wheel and we rotate it to our, you know, drifting degree, right? I like to drift at the angle of about 9 3. How many rotations is that? I guess one full rotation to either direction at 9 3, my two spokes right here, and seeing where the alignment is. Preferably, you'd want this to be at 0. You want the maximum contact patch in the front leading tire. So in this case, my left tire. And as you can clearly see, it is not at 0. It's at 1.7 degrees of camber. So what I'm going to do when I go back into the tuning menu is I'm going to add negative 1.7 degrees of camber. That way, when I turn to my drifting degree that I want to be at, my angle of my front wheels, my leading tire patch is flat. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to drive along this flat patch, going from first, second to third, allowing my car to dig. And what we're going to be looking at is our rear camber and our rear toe. We're going to turn around and we're just going to do that real quick. As you can see, when it is flat, it's about at 0.5 degrees of positive camber in the rear. And when I get on throttle, as you can see, it goes up and stays about the same. Now my toe stays relatively stagnant. We'll just do this one more time. Just let the car dig into the pavement. Okay, so as we can see, it raises slightly in the rear when it comes to our camber. Now, what that means is this car has what's called anti-squat. And what that is not allowing the car to squat when it is under compression. So driving along, accelerate, instead of the car dipping, it raises in the rear. A lot of drift cars do this to stable out that contact patch and get more grip. Now with this car, it's a smidge bit extreme, right? We have a little bit much in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to balance out the camber first. So since we're getting 0.5 positive degrees of camber in the rear, we're going to add 0.5 negative degrees in our tuning menu. So let's go here. So we're going to take the front camber to negative 7.4. If you didn't know, negative 5.7 plus negative 1.7 is negative 7.4. And then the rear, we're going to take out some of this positive camber. So we're going to have 0.2 degrees in the rear. So from here, let's go back to our flat patch and check out our theory. So first things first, I want to stop the car. As you can see, we have a lot more front camber. We turn to our 9 and 3. And yes, this is exactly what I want. My front leading wheel, aka my left wheel here, is at a perfect contact patch, aka 0 degrees of camber. That is what we want. And then our rear end, put it back to center. Let's do a couple pulls, see how we do. Flooring it, dips a little bit of compression. We're going to turn around one more time. And as you can see, my rear contact patch is now neutral. This way I can get the most speed out of the corner and I won't have to left foot brake as much. So let's do a quick run and see how this goes. Come through, second, third, fourth. On these big corners, right, I can carry a lot more speed. I have a lot better of a contact patch. Now, my approach to this second corner needs to be a little different, not as outside. I'm going to downshift just to see what happens. Transition. And yeah, I can already feel a new sense of speed coming out of the car. I feel a lot more stable. I'm not, having the left foot brake as much. I could trust a lot more in my right foot and the car just driving for me rather than me having to fight the car through the corners. So still left foot braking a little bit, as you can see by the wheel cam. Couple clutch kicks, left foot brake, a lot of throttle. Transition through. Yeah, and I can really trust myself being on the wall there. A little bit of a tap, transition, clutch in to slow the rotation. Absolutely flooring it through the corner. Awesome. This right now feels great out of the box. This right now feels fantastic, but there is one more thing I want to touch on that could definitely enhance this car. So the next thing I want to look at is my wheel rate and my anti-roll bar. So right now we have 88 in the front, 41 in the rear. And the ride height is about even. This is actually what we want. And thanks to the great people over at VDC, they put a pretty decent base setup on the cars. Right now, my front end feels as I want it to, right? It's not super pointy. It's not understeering all over the place. It's a little bit numb, but it is somewhat reactive. And I'm confident and able to hold the steering wheel in one position and me being able to drive through the corner. So when it comes to spring rates, I honestly don't want to mess with anything. It drives really well right now. But what I do want to mess with a little bit is the anti-roll bar. I feel like I could get a little more grip out of the front and a little more oomph out of my transitions. So I'm going to add a little bit of bar into the front of this car and see how it reacts. As a general consensus, when it comes to the slider right here, as you can see this red slider, I always want my front anti-roll bar to be lower than the rear. Let's see if this adjustment helps me or if it hurts me. Transition in. I can feel myself kind of pushing off the track a little more. I'm having to do a bit more left foot brake just because I have a little more forward in the front with that roll bar. Transition. In transition a lot more aggressively. As you can see, when I do transition, it kind of pushes out. It's not really as on rails as it was before. So honestly, that change wasn't great. I don't really like that change. So we're going to take that roll bar out of the front and let's try it again. Yeah, comparatively, I could be a lot more confident. I do have a little less speed than before, yeah, but I feel a lot more confident in the car where I could position it. It doesn't feel like the front's pushing as much. It feels a lot more stable. Again, it is a little slower, but it's a lot easier to drive. My instance right now, I really want this car to drive as easy as possible. I see that last corner, I just floored it, right? When I put the bar in the front, I couldn't floor it because it was pushing so much. So I kind of wanted to bring that up because in tuning, right, everyone has different preference. You may prefer to have a little more push in the front, so you should add roll bar or you should increase your wheel rate, right? For me, I like a pretty stable front end. And the greatest part about tuning in a video game is you don't have to make a bunch of changes that will take an hour. Tuning in this game is really about feel. So you being able to feel out where you like stuff, where you don't like stuff is fantastic. And again, it's all preference. I want to jump back to the wheel rate real quick. On the majority of the cars in this game, for the longer cars, you typically want a stiffer spring in the front just to be able to pivot the car better. In this case, we kept it kind of soft and it feels good. But the typical wheel rates in the front of the car, for me at least, is anywhere from 80 to 110, just depending on the car. And in the rear, anywhere from 30 to 50. And then again, roll bar is all preference. I always like to have more in the rear than the front, just so it's able to pivot a lot better. But yeah, right now, this car drives really well. And honestly, I didn't do too much. I'm able to lay down solid runs that are consistent without spending hours tuning. And again, that's really what I wanted to touch on, is that tuning, 80% of it is just the basics. And that extra 20%, that extra edge, is really preference and understanding how the car feels and making those adjustments. Stalled there, that's embarrassing. But having a good basic setup car is 80% of it, right? And I hope this video was valuable in helping you figure out those basics, which again is tires, gearing, alignment, your diff, your brakes, and then a little bit of suspension work. And it can make your experience drifting loads better. And don't forget, your force feedback is a big factor. So if it feels too stiff or it's oscillating, try lowering your force feedback. It can help a lot. With that said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe. Go check out Balance Racing for some great deals on Sim Magic equipment and loads of other sim gear such as turnkeys, bundles, products, etc. Go check it out down below. With that, thank you so much again for watching. And with that, take care, and I'll catch you in the next video.